What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, I got a first-person shooter for you guys today, but this one is decidedly different. I've actually finished this game already. I streamed a bunch of it, and I ended up finishing it after that. And I wanted to show this to you guys because this didn't hit on all cylinders for me, but you can't say it's not lacking in personality. Or you can't say it is lacking in personality, I guess. And I think this is something that could appeal to a lot of people, so I wanted to show it off. So, this is Fashion Police Squad. FPS, get it? Yeah, I actually think the title's pretty clever. And, well, you're not killing anyone in this game, which is typically what you do in a first-person shooter. You're solving fashion crimes, and you are trying to make people stylish in your city of Trendopolis. Yeah, this game is loaded to the gills with puns, and, well, as someone who is a fan of punny humor, that's good for me, but you just be warned about that before you go in here. Now, as I said, I've finished this already, but we're gonna jump into an earlier mission. So the game has 13 missions, which have bonus conditions for each one that you can finish if you want. It also has 3 challenge missions. I've beaten the whole thing. I haven't aced the whole thing. It took me about 5 hours, but it might take you longer for sure if you want to get all the secrets and stuff. There are secrets in this. This has kind of been billed as having appeal to the boomer shooter crowd because it does have a bit more of a retro aesthetic. And yeah, it kind of does, but it's definitely got its own, it beats to its own drum. There's no doubt about that. So when you go in here with your character, you have these outfits. You unlock them over the course of playing the game. Each one has different benefits to them. This Trend Center here is the one you get for finishing the game, so it kind of makes you OP. So I'm going to go with something a little bit earlier here. And because I have finished the game, I do have all the weapons, which is something that's a little bit different. But you're going to get the idea here really quick of what we're doing. So as I said, you are trying to solve fashion crimes. You do not kill a single person in this game. You just you make them stylish because that is the way of the world in this universe. And the game really leans into it. It's got a funny sense of humor. The dialogue is kind of funny. There's a bit much of it, but I think it's funny. There's fake brands all over the place, some of which, like Supreme, like this, just made me giggle. I think that's pretty funny. And there's a lot of things like that. The game has a lot of personality. As you can see, it's very colorful, and the parts that aren't colorful, you're aiming to make that way. So it's got this sort of pixelized look to it. It's definitely not boomer shooter in the sense that it's not trying to appeal to a 90s aesthetic. It's newer than that, but also drawing heavy inspiration from that, which I think is pretty cool. And as you're going to see here, your aim is to go through the levels and take out, or not take out, because you don't kill anyone in this, but to fashionize all of the various people in this. You have a number of different weapons in this, and you'll face a number of enemies, and each one of them needs to be dealt with a specific weapon. Some enemies you can deal with multiple weapons, but in different ways, and some are more effective than others, but some of the enemies you can only deal with in one way. And you have to switch between the different weapons, especially in the later combat encounters. Most of the way I played through this game, I thought it was pretty easy, at least on the normal difficulty. Some of the later levels were no pushover. You know, were they really old school, you know, hard? No, but the difficulty curve turned into a bit of a cliff near the end, though I did, as I said, I did manage to finish the game. And I'm sure if you turned up the difficulty, which you do have the option to do, excuse me, it would definitely amp things up a little bit. So you can see what it's leaning into here. It's, you know, the way you heal yourself in this is with mocktails, and your armor is actually what's called swag. It's pretty hysterical. You have a little Doom Guy portrait in the bottom left there, and basically as you take damage, you start to look less and less fashionable to the point where you downright look like a hobo by the end. As you can see here, here's a new type of enemy that the game is introducing. It's the guy in an ill-fitting suit, which he just looks like he has 80s style shoulder pads to me, but this guy you have to take out with a different gun. So we're going to roll over to that once it tells me that. And you can see by hitting him with the wrong type of gun, it actually shows that. and it says now to go to this one. And there you go. And every time you stylize an enemy, it calls out some kind of fashionable noun. They do repeat, but I have to say there are a lot of them. So it didn't really get old to me personally. I thought it was kind of funny. The style and the humor that this game is going for is pretty great. And you can definitely say that you've never played a shooter like this before. It's pretty ridiculous. So I have the weapon wheel here. Now I only have my two. Okay, when I started this mission before, I had all the guns, but I guess not. But you'll pick up different guns, and they're all stylized off of some kind of fashion thing. This is a dye gun. This gun is effectively a machine gun mixed with a sewing machine. There's the BFG in this is effectively a chest of drawers. It's all fashion related. So it follows its theme from edge to edge, and I do like that. I think the personality in this is funny. Some of the bosses are quite inventive and interesting. You also have this thing, the Belt of Justice, which you can use to crack open crates and also to stun enemies and to do some platforming challenges that are in this. The first-person platforming that they put in this game is not bad. It's clear that they always intended for it to be there. You know, one of the things I really dislike is when platformers that are not designed for it try to shoehorn in platforming sections. And this didn't do that because it's very clear that this one was intending to include that. So the platforming is not too bad. I do find that the swinging mechanic when you're using the belt gets a little... It can get a little touchy sometimes and a little tricky, but it's never too bad. And all of the different weapons in this and the ways in which you have to deal with the enemies are very unique and very clever. You've never seen anything like this before. There are variants on old school weapons like the shotgun or the machine gun or things like that, but they are... There we go. There's what the stun looks like. And yeah, the key cards in this game are scissors that get you past ribbons because, of course, you know, you can't go past a velvet rope. There are rules, man. And you're a law enforcement officer. You can't, you know, you can't break the rules. You can't cross the velvet rope uninvited, you know? So... yeah, the personality in this kept me kind of giggling pretty much from end to end. And when I was streaming it, my audience thought it was pretty funny too. And on that front, I think they're doing a fantastic job here. The problem that I have with this game, and I'd say it's going to be a little bit controversial because a lot of people are enjoying this through and through, but I think while the personality is the selling point of Fashion Police Squad, that it's not a particularly fun shooter. At least if you're someone like me who is a big fan of first-person shooters, and in particular, a big fan of, you know, what are called boomer shooters, which are either old school shooters or the newer shooters that are modeled after old school design ideals. And the problem with this is that it doesn't allow for much creativity in terms of how you approach your different scenarios. You know, when you're in a shooter, when you're playing an old school shooter, so here's a story beat here. I'm just going to skip this because I won't bother to spoil it. But yeah, you're dealing with Deep Coat who rides around on a Roomba. Yeah, it's not serious at all. And the problem is there's no real creativity allowed in the scenarios. In most shooters, you have a variety of different weapons, and you can use those weapons to approach encounters with enemies however you want. And every enemy can be attacked by every weapon, and it's really up to you to figure the most effective and or stylish way to complete your objectives. The problem with this game is it doesn't allow for any of that because certain weapons only work on certain enemies. Again, some allow more than one, but most don't. So the challenge when you're in a scenario is to juggle between the enemies that are there, switching weapons rapidly on the fly so that you can deal with a certain crowd. But you have to deal with that crowd the same way every time, effectively. Yeah, you can approach the enemies in different order, but you're always going to have to take out these guys with this gun, these guys with this gun, these guys with this gun, and you can't mix it up and try different styles and approaches. Also, in a similar front, you've seen the way the level has gone so far here, where the level designs are very closed, they're very linear. You're basically going from boxy combat arena to boxy combat arena with a little bit of platforming in between. The levels are not wide open. There aren't a lot of opportunities to approach the levels in different ways and do, again, make for some interesting combat scenarios. You know, the level design in this, I personally think, is very basic. It doesn't do anything particularly interesting or creative. It just, you go from box to box to box, and you take out enemies. Now, a lot of people are probably going to say, well, what about games that I have liked, such as, you know, the newer Doom games or Bulletstorm or games like that? Don't they just go between combat arenas generally? Yeah, they do. But again, because you're not restricted in terms of what weapons you can use against what enemies for the most part, it allows a lot of creativity, and those combat arenas tend to be, oh yeah, this enemy's great. Guy with the saggy pants who vapes everywhere. Yeah. In those combat arenas, they vary a lot. So there's a lot of different variations on the environment. There's a lot of different hazards in the environment that you have to deal with. There are a lot of different ways to approach the scenario to deal with the enemies that you're presented here. In this game, with a handful of exceptions, every arena is more or less the same. It's a box or a corridor, and the environments are static. There's no hazards that you can really use. There's no objects that you can manipulate, or that you can cover behind, or that you can use to mix up the scenario. You go from each arena to each arena, and you have to do basically what the game wants you to do, maybe mixing up the order slightly, but that's kind of it. Once you've done an arena once, that's kind of it. You've seen it, and there isn't really going to be a significantly different way to approach it next time. And if you're playing on the harder difficulties, you know, in a lot of older school games like Doom and Quake and that, playing on the higher difficulties required you to really approach each playthrough very, very differently, to approach the arenas differently, because a way that would work on one difficulty wouldn't work on the other. In this, because everything is so tightly clustered together, and because you're so restricted in what you can do with each enemy, well, you don't have much of that variance, and the higher difficulty just means it's going to be harder. It just means you have to dodge more, and the enemies are going to hurt more, and they're going to take more damage. So that's where I think this falls down. I do still think it's interesting. I'm still glad I played it, and I think the personality of this is a really great selling point, and it is something different in first-person shooters, and something that's truly different and has very different mechanics to it is not something that we necessarily see all the time, and I'll applaud them for that. I think that's pretty cool. But I think they forgot, in a game, yes, and you also have this option. When you charge this up, and you literally get to slap the fashion sense into people. And because you slide towards enemies, I'ma just say, this is super satisfying. I do love this. It's very rare. Usually, if you're lucky, only get to do it once per level, unfortunately, which is kind of a bummer. But, yeah. It's delightful. I do like that. And that's the thing. There's just it feels like for a game where the title's acronym is FPS, that they kind of forgot to bring the FPS-ness to it, and that's a little bit of a bummer. I think they focused a little too much on style. Oh yeah, and at the end of every mission, all the enemies that you took out have to do a fashion show. Pretty hilarious. It's called the Parole Ball. And yeah, it's just, it feels like it's much more style over substance. And I don't like to say that, but, and while I did enjoy my time with this, I really expected more from it as a first-person shooter. It's leaning a little too much on its personality to sell the fact that as an actual game, it's a little basic. You know, it's got secrets, it's got stuff like that. There is, you know, it does maintain some of those older school things that people will like about this type of thing, but to me, the gameplay just felt a little flat. And by the end, especially when the difficulty really ramped up and you were having to juggle large encounters of different kinds of enemies, but again, having to use specific weapons, I was just kind of like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm cool. You know, and I did finish it, but it wore out its welcome with me pretty fast. Balls, 469. There's a boss here that I won't spoil, I don't think, but you get the idea here. If I gave scores or recommendations on this, I would probably say that this is like, if I was going to rate this game on Steam, I would give it a tentative thumbs up right now, but this is a game where I really wish there was a sideways thumb, you know, where you could just go, yeah, it's okay. It's not bad. It's clear it was very lovingly crafted. It's clear that they knew what they wanted to make here and put a lot into its personality and its style, of which it is dripping in both. I think that's really good. I think it would have been a little better if all the dialogue in this was voiced rather than text. I think it might have made the characters a little more relatable. And it's not a bad game. I just don't think it's a great shooter. And to be honest, if this didn't have the level of style that it has, I probably would have been less charitable to it. I probably would have thought this was kind of a bad game if it wasn't for the incredible personality that they brought to this. And the fact that it's a game not, you know, it's a shooter that's not about killing people, and it's colorful and it's interesting and it's different. I will give plenty of credit where it's due on that front. But yeah, if this does well enough to get a sequel, and I hope it does, I do hope they can bring a little bit more shooter into it. Because, like, here's another thing. With a couple of exceptions for the high-end guns, every weapon has unlimited ammo. You have to reload, but every weapon has unlimited ammo, so you don't even have to ammo manage in this. You know, again, really nothing. There's really little to it that you would recognize in what makes a traditional first-person shooter challenging and interesting. And yeah, if it was me, I would probably have picked this up on a sale. But I wanted to show this off because, again, while this is a game that doesn't 100% resonate with me, I think there are cool elements to it, and I wanted to show that off because some of you might be much more interested in this and might be like, no, you know what? This isn't a sale game for me. I want to play something that's different like this, and that's perfectly fair. I think that makes good sense. So, yeah, I didn't just want to do a stream of this one. I wanted to show it off and let you people make up your own mind on this. But it is interesting. It's just, yeah, as a shooter, I've one and done it, and I'm kind of glad it didn't take me super long to do so. So that is Fashion Police Squad. Yeah, interesting, but more style over substance for me, I think. So, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think about this. You know, do you like this idea more than I did? Do you think I was being too harsh? What do you think that this could have done to make itself a better shooter than it turned out to be? And are there any other shooters out there that you know of that are doing something really different, but perhaps play a little bit better? I'd love to know about that. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover indie and retro stuff over there, including a lot of stuff that's better suited to streaming that you won't see here on YouTube. We have a great community there, and I'd love to see you be a part of it. Thank you again, everybody, and I'll see you on the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.